Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Moving right along here, we are keeping up with the DM guide. In particular, we're going on to part 4 of the Putting It All Together reshoot, and this time, like I promised last time around, we are finishing up what the big bad evil guy looks like. Specifically, we're going over his spells and equipment now. And if I can move through it fast enough, maybe I'll throw in a couple other little tidbits in there, but that is going to be our main focus for today. Now, let's keep moving this along, shall we? Now, when it comes to the spells here, I do have most everything thought out here, and there's a couple of points where I note that a couple of spells have been taking up 2 slots, meaning he just basically has the spell memorized twice for the day and can make repeated use of that spell. And there's also one other little notation in there, but we'll bring that up as we move along. Starting us off for his 0 level spells, which at 13th level he can make use of 4 times per day. He has Detect Magic, affects a 30-foot radius, Read Magic, and the Light spell. Now, out of those there, he's going to use Detect Magic twice, more than likely. Detecting Magic is always going to be useful. Most spellcasters will probably make pretty active use of this, and Elias Briarthorn is no exception to this. Going right along here to first level spells, we have the Entangle spell, which affects a 40-foot radius, and it hinders movement. Any person that moves through this area that is not somehow immune to effects that create difficult terrain and possibly entrap or ensnare them, they're going to have to make reflex saves, and this will help him keep opponents pinned down or trapped, particularly those that may not be as overwhelmingly skilled as some other opponents might be. There's also the Fairy Fire spell, Long Strider, Produce Flame, which will deal 1d6 plus 5 points of damage, has a 120-foot range, and he has this memorized twice for the day, and the Obscuring Mist spell. Some of these spells I may have talked about through other spell guides for different character classes, but I'm not going to quite get into all the details of each of these spells today, just because we'd be here a while. I mean, I only do about less than 10 spells for the Witch's Guide, and each level of those is taking so long. Anyways, these spells are going to help him tactically with many different fights, since most of the situations he's getting himself into are more combat oriented. Long Strider is going to enhance his speed. Obscuring Mist is going to make it difficult for opponents to spot where he is, so on and so forth. And then second level spells, which he can make use of 5 times per day. He gets Bull's Strength, which lasts for 13 minutes. Flaming Sphere, which deals 3d6 points of fire damage, and this is another one he has memorized twice while he has this active. For as many rounds as it will last, he can will and direct the spell around to, roll through different areas, affect different creatures and the like, catch a lot of different things on fire. Really handy if you're rolling this through a town or a fort. Many, many, many flammable things in these city kind of places. But then we also have Heat Metal and Spider Climb. Now, Heat Metal is such a great spell. I mean, you have a knight bearing down on you in full plate armor, hit them with Heat Metal, and just absolutely ruin their day. And of course, Spider Climb is going to help with his maneuverability and help him get into different odd positions that will make it difficult for other characters to fight him. Then third level spells, which again, 5 times a day, so he can make use of 5 of these spells. You have Spike Growth, which has an incredible 230-foot range for his level. It affects 13 20-foot squares, lasts for 13 hours, and that each of these squares, with these Spike Growths, they'll deal 1d4 points of piercing damage for every 5 feet that the target moves through. So if they start, if they approach one of these squares, it's 20 feet by 20 feet, and they move down through them, each 5-foot section will deal 1d4 points of damage. Now, they can make a reflex save or have their half their movement. He has this memorized twice, so this is going to be impeding the character's movement, and as they take damage and they're failing their reflex saves, their movement is going to be halved, and so they're going to be struggling to go through this area even faster. Depending on where exactly the players are fighting this character, this spell gives him some flexibility in blocking off certain sections, either to protect himself and make it harder for faster characters to charge up on him or flank him, or if he has them on the ropes, he can use this to block off certain sections and make it difficult for the players to get away without the use of some significant magic on their part. So there's a lot of great things. This is a very, very tactically useful spell. The fact that it deals damage is nice, but that's really not what we're looking for here. This spell is going to be kind of the meat and potatoes of the fight for him, aside from his wild shape ability and it being able to inflict different kinds, the blinding sickness on the players. So this is going to help keep him trapped, keep the players trapped with him, or keep them from approaching him, and then also with his treant form and the massive amount of reach that he has, they can't quite charge or rush him, but he can still reach out and start slapping them with his long, gangly tree limbs that are just suffused with this horrible Icarus sickness that just is, I love it. Incredibly useful. But after that, we have Call Lightning, which will deal 3d6 points of lightning damage. It gets 10 bolts, and the spell will do 3d10 points of damage if they're outdoors or if there's any kind of stormy weather. And he has this memorized twice as well. Then after that, he has Protection from Energy, 156 points against whatever the selected element is. And he's going to cast and use this spell once he knows what kind of damage type the players favor hitting him with, whether it's fire, lightning, acid, ice, whatever damage type there is. This is what he'll use this spell for, in order to keep himself trucking right along and powering through whatever the players may be throwing at him. But then for 4th level spells, gets 5 slots each day. He'll have Rusting Grasp, which, if he touches a metal object, there's a fortitude save involved, but if it fails, then the object will be rusting away to dust. Just some oxidized dust laying there in a nice, neat little horrifying for the players pile on the ground there. Then there's the Giant Vermin spell, which, giant growth, giant size. He can take that, hit a verminous creature with it like a millipede, centipede, cockroach, and just massively increase its size and have a very handy companion to throw out there and keep fighting with the players. Then we have Flame Strike, which deals 10d6 points of fire damage. Spike Stones, which works like the Spike Growth spell, but instead of dealing 1d4, it deals 1d8 points of piercing damage, and he's got that memorized twice as well. For 5th level spells, which again, this time around he gets 4 a day. He has Call Lightning Storm, which works as Call Lightning, but deals 5d6 points of damage, and can upgrade to the 10d6, I'm sorry, 5d10 if he's outside or it's already stormy weather. And there's also Tree Stride, which pretty handy for druids in the woods. If there's one tree here, then, however many miles away, I believe it's 13 miles for him, he can step into one tree and the other tree 13 miles away he'll come out of. So great, easy way for him to move around on the battlefield, particularly say if he's assaulting one of the cities and the players are there and he sees or gets word that they're causing problems, then he can just stride right on through and just bring all sorts of pain to them. And we also have Rock to Mud, which affects 2 10-foot cubes a level. So at level 13, let's see, 13 10-foot cubes times 2, so 26 10-foot cubes per level. Now, while that's impressive in and of itself, say he's assaulting the capital city and needs to collapse a section of the wall, well, this isn't going to make the entire wall disintegrate, but if he hits some more of the key structural points and those just melt away to nothing, all that's going to come tumbling down. Or if the players are causing problems and it's a nicely paved cobble road, then changing this up with rock to mud is going to make the terrain difficult, and that will be useful in and of itself as well. And then going on after that, after we get the rock to mud, we have stone skin. Now stone skin is really, really, really handy and very useful. Damage reduction of 10 unless it's an adamantium weapon that he's struck with. Now, that'll block 130 points of damage total, and then the effect ends. And what this will do, if any of the players comes up, they stab him, they strike him with some kind of weapon, unless it's adamantium, this is going to subtract 10 damage total from whatever they may have done to him. So if they roll 13 points of damage and the spell is on, they're only going to deal 3. Unless, again, that weapon is made from adamantium. And then the adamantium weapon will just completely ignore this spell effect and carry right on through. But this is a spell he's going to have on himself before he enters combat. Just because, you know, it's conceivable that when he goes on his rampage, when he goes tearing through everything, he's still going to approach this with some measure of forethought. And having an extra 130 points of damage on his hit point totals, that's going to be incredibly useful. That's essentially what this does. It's basically extra hit points. So definitely he'll have this on beforehand, because there's going to be plenty of guards firing arrows at him, throwing whatever they can his way, hitting him with axes, swords, spears, all of that fun stuff. So having something that absorbs more of that damage will keep him in the fight longer, and will also help prevent him from having to burn through quite so many spells. Then for 6th level spells, he'll get 2 a day. He'll have Greater Dispel Magic, and it's going to be memorized twice just because, well, the spell was covered in the Witch's Guide, but this is going to let him do a greater degree of targeted or area blanket, just general dispelling, and removing so many spell effects, which, going up against the players, there probably will be plenty of those. So suppressing their magic abilities, suppressing their magic items, that will be incredibly handy and useful. And after that, he gets the True Seeing spell. For his level 7 spell, he only gets 1. True Seeing will let him see through so many different illusions, invisibility. He'll be able to better pinpoint where the players are. Definitely very, very useful, very tactically important spells. And used in conjunction with the rest of these, this is going to be an absolute wrecking ball of a character for the players to have to fight. But he's also got some equipment with him. Now, I didn't go through and give him a ton of things. I didn't give him everything possible under the sun, partly because, well, 1, that's a lot of work, and 2, this should still have an element of customizability for all of you DMs and storytellers out there. So add or take away whatever you feel is appropriate, and make this character fit a little bit better with your setting and with your world. Same thing for the spells as well, too. I picked some spells that were tactically useful and interesting, and could be used in interesting ways, along with his wild shape ability and his ability to spread disease. The equipment here should also be customizable. If you don't like a certain effect or think something should be tweaked, do so. If you think something will mesh really nicely with what's here, then add that in. More power to all of you. But let's keep going. Probably one of the most important items is the Crown of Yimnaris, the antlered skull of Briarthorn's departed animal companion. Bits of flesh still exist in eternal decay on this skull. A fell gleam emanates from a pustulating socket as wet, tattered skin bonds with its wearer's flesh. In life, Yimnaris was hailed as king of the forest, a physical manifestation of the will of these ancient woods. That connection exists as a seething, pained hatred that connects to any creature corrupted by the same hate. And what this crown does for Elias Briarthorn is that it will let him scry through the crown's connection to any plague-bearing animal, vermin, or person. person, seeing and sensing all that they can perceive. This is an incredibly handy and useful ability and lets him keep aware of what's happening, well, essentially almost at all times. He has to focus and pick out where he's focusing his senses through, but he can do so essentially at will. Very, very useful. Now, I should note, if he casts True Seeing on himself, that does not mean he can use True Seeing as he's scrying through other creatures. He's limited to how the other creatures can see, sense, or smell. He's limited to what their senses are. So if he's seeing through a creature that has dark vision, then he can see what that creature sees with its dark vision. If he's trying to sense through a creature that's blind, he can't sense anything through its eyes. But if it's got a keen sense of smell, then he can smell what they're smelling. So there are limitations to this, although it does have a very potent effect, allowing him to connect with any plagued creature. After that, we have Rot Talon. Originally a scimitar fashioned from the heart of an ironwood tree, the plagues of body and spirit within its owner have carried over to the blade. And now, Rot Talon seeps with foul liquors and pus-dripping wounds, spreading disease to all that it touches. In the Flesh Rot effect, failing a DC 21 Fortitude save on a critical hit means that the target will take 2d6 points of damage per round until they make their save. So, it's a pretty good effect, fairly powerful, but it's only something that occurs on a critical hit, which does limit it somewhat. Now, scimitars have a wider crit range, going from 18 to 20, dealing times 2 points of damage, but it's only when they make this critical hit, so they can't just threaten on it. The critical hit has to be confirmed. But if it does, then this disease is just going to eat away at the character's flesh, just as this necrosis sets in and just starts rotting and eating things away relatively fast. But in terms of how much damage that it's dealing to the characters, not a whole lot. And really, this effect may not see a whole lot of use, since, as I mentioned before, Elias is probably going to be preferring to fight in his treant form and use his spells in conjunction with that. So, after that, we have Plague Heart. This spear hangs with still wet scalps and dripping beards of the hunters and woodcutters that defiled the druid's glove and slaughtered Yamnaris, tied round the shaft near the rusting pitted blade. Now, this spear is used as more of a ritual item for a point later on in the adventure arc where this circle of druids is trying to poison one of the main rivers in order to cut off water supply to the region, and also spread the corruption further out to more animals that depend on this river, as well as the plant life and any other human or otherwise living beings that may draw from it. So it'll be an important point for the players to potentially avert a major crisis and having a major blow dealt not only to the more civilized peoples of the region, but also a more permanent scar that could otherwise take root unless the players do something to avert it. The spear can be used as a weapon, but it's going to be more something that's used to corrupt animals and, like I said, water sources, and is more the crux of an important activity that the players can participate in over the course of this adventure. And the last thing on here is the hide of Ibixthrus. This hide armor was fashioned from the skin of an aged, powerful chimera that had begun terrorizing the Illaran Hills region. Elias had organized hunting parties to find and slay the creature, and dealt the killing blow himself. Its +1 hide armor gives him a total of +5 to his armor class, and only has a -2 armor check penalty since it's a master-crafted item. It's a magic item, so it has to be master-crafted in the first place, but it just gives a certain sense of history of who Elias was beforehand, before he became this horrible creature that seeks to snuff out civilized life, but is, carrying forth as this vessel of corruption. And It also bumps up his armor class and makes him just a tiny bit harder to hit. At level 13, though, assuming the characters are like level 10 when they're fighting him, a level 17 AC is not going to be very difficult for martially inclined characters to hit, but it's better than him just sitting down there at a 12. This coupled with his protection from elements and his stone skin spell, this is going to make him an incredibly difficult fight for the players, but it should still be fun and interesting as they come up with different ways to overcome the spike growths, the different damage types that he can deal out, as well as the diseases that he's capable of inflicting on them. But that's going to be all for now. We're going to wrap up this video here, otherwise I'll start rambling on much too long, and, well, maybe some of you are enjoying that, but I've got to learn to pace and control myself. And just to give everyone an update, there may be a slight delay with the player's guide video. I may try to do something else to fill in that time. Some events have occurred with the family, and, well, the ties that bind call me away, but we'll keep things going here. I have been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all for your time, and you guys have yourselves a good night.